Hello and welcome to the video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at this thing here. This is the Tello drone from RYZE. Inside it has some technology from DJI and also running an Intel processor as well. Now this isn't normally the kind of thing that I'd look at on the channel, but a couple of people have been in touch and a Patreon has as well, so I thought I'd take a look and we'll do an overview of it. So we'll talk about the specifications, how it comes in this box, what you can and can't do with it. I'll give you a whistle-stop tour of the application that you need to install on Android or iOS to control this thing, and then we'll talk about how it flies at the end. So let's very quickly talk about the specifications. This is an 80-gram quadcopter, gives you about 12-13 minutes flight time, has a Wi-Fi range of about 100 meters. Again, you're going to need a little app or a smartphone or a little tablet to run the app on. You can find it in the store of your device by searching for Tello. I tried it on both Android and iOS and it seemed to work fine. 720p video recording. The video recording is actually stored on the tablet or smartphone that you're using rather than directly on the craft. There's no SD card in here and it takes 5 megapixel stills. The thing to remember though is this is a brushed quadcopter, which I'm a little bit sad about. So all this fantastic technology and they've stuck brushed motors on it, which does mean that over time those will eventually degrade and need to be replaced. It features a number of flight modes. By default it comes in the very simple flight mode that's a piece of cake to fly. Even if you've never flown a multi-rotor before, a new pilot would get an awful lot of confidence from flying this, because not only does it have very gentle flight characteristics, it also has an optical sensor underneath which allows it to keep position in one place, and it also seems to work pretty hard at trying to maintain its altitude as well as you fly around, so you don't have to do any work with the throttle as you bank the craft over. Has modes like throw and go, which allow you to throw it up into the air. Has 8D flip, so you can flip and roll it if you want to with a flick of a finger. And some slightly wacky things called bounce mode, which will bounce up and down as well. But we'll look at the modes in a little bit more detail in a second. There are a number of features on here that if you're into DJI technology will feel very familiar to you. Things like auto land and takeoff, low battery protection, and also additional sensors and help to take a lot of the hard work out of flying the model. So let me just show you how it comes in the box. As you take it out the top, it's part of these two plastic clamshells, and then if you open the bottom of the box, then you'll find the battery, USB cable, and also a spare set of props as well. Once you have plugged the battery into the back of the model, then plug it into a USB port and it will charge the battery, then that's the model assembly done. It's very quick and straightforward. So if you've never had a quadcopter or a drone before, there isn't really any setup on the model to speak of. While the battery's charging, go and download the Tello app. You can find it by searching for Tello on any of the Android stores or the Apple store. Download and install that application. When you turn the quadcopter on, and by briefly pressing the power button, it'll turn the quadcopter on. The light will start to flash quickly. It'll create a Wi-Fi hotspot. If you search for that on your device, you will find it. It'll call Tello followed by a string of numbers and characters. If you connect to that, by default there's no password. Then open the Tello app. You will then be able to access the quadcopter and you'll have a view out of the camera. And here is where you also control it as well. If you wanted to, you could add a Bluetooth joystick that goes around the outside of the phone. I actually invested in one. Unfortunately, the way it is recognized and the way that the sticks are mapped inside the application for the Tello drone didn't work at all. So I had to use the little control sticks on the screen. So I think it's probably worthwhile actually going through a little bit more detail of what is actually in this application that you use to control your quadcopter, because the way you access all the features on the quad is using this little app. So the main screen, you have the controls, so it's by default it's a mode 2, so you have the throttle and the rudder on the left hand side, aileron, elevator on the right. You have the flight mode button that you have all the different flight modes, so you can choose the one that you want to use from here. Again, you have to click the button and then click the flight mode. You also then have the extra functions, which is where you set the flight speed, and you can also do some quite cool stuff like switch it on for VR mode, and it appears to be turning into a pseudo 3D view, which is quite clever. And you also have access to some of the nitty-gritty stuff in the bottom of the menus here, where you can calibrate the IMU and you can change the settings of how this thing actually works. But for this one here, the default settings work perfectly. It was set up great out the box for very gentle, stable flying. You can switch between the 720p recording and the 5 megapixel stills at the touch of a button, and then by pressing the record button in the top right hand corner, we'll actually start and stop recordings or take a photo. So now we've done that, let me just show you what it's like to actually use. So here we are out in the garden, a little bit of wind, but hopefully not enough to upset it. So I'm going to press the top left hand corner, which is the takeoff, and then slide the slider to start the quadcopter, and it will take off to about chest height and then just sit here, and it is very stable, and using that optical system underneath, it'll try and stay in one position. So as soon as you take your fingers off the sticks, then the quadcopter will work very hard to maintain its position and also its altitude as well. The controls for someone like me that's used to using more of a radio with sticks isn't great because there's no real feedback of where your thumbs are, and you have to kind of guess where they are, because what you're doing is dragging your thumbs around the screen in those kind of two virtual pads to control how the quadcopter is flying. But this is very easy to fly, and even a novice pilot would very quickly start to get to grips with it. You don't need to learn the vagaries of a radio control radio. You don't need to have any FPV goggles on. If you've got a smartphone or a tablet, then you can have this little guy flying around inside or in your back garden as soon as you've got the battery charged. Landing is exactly the same. You just press the lander button in the top left hand corner, ask you to confirm, you say yep, it'll gently land onto the ground. Once it's on the ground, it's detected it's no longer falling, it'll then stop the props. So after playing with this thing for a week or two, what's it actually like? Well, the thing is, this is unbelievably easy to fly. They have removed an awful lot of the complexity, an awful lot of the stuff that you need to think about if you're going to get into quadcopter or multicopter flying. It just works out the box, and with the technology and the application doing an awful lot of the hard work for you, the barrier of entry is very low indeed. You don't need to go and invest in another radio control, you don't need to buy any FPV goggles. If you've got a smartphone, which let's face it, pretty much everyone has or has access to now, you can install the application on it and you are ready to rock and roll. The setup is very simple and easy to do. As we just saw in the video, you just slap the battery in, charge it up, download the application, and once you've connected to the Wi-Fi signal from the quadcopter, you go into the application and you just run it like you would any other app or game on your phone. And there are some really nice flight modes, like there's the up and away, and there's also the circle mode. So if you wanted to use this as kind of a selfie drone, where you wanted to keep it in a backpack, and if you're in an area where there's no breeze at all, you could run this thing as a selfie drone, as well as use it to fly around and impress your friends. The thing that I was particularly impressed about, but I haven't seen too much actually written about it yet, is there is a Scratch and SDK links. So if you know anything about Scratch, it's kind of a programming language that kids use at school to learn the logic of programming, and it's kind of a drag and drop block system to create programs, and you can write some quite sophisticated stuff in it. There is integration with that tool as well as SDKs, which means that it could be interesting for those kids who were interested in creating programs that did something with the Tello drone. And I love the idea that you could potentially use this not just as something to play with to see whether or not you like quadcopters, but to actually do something a little bit more interesting with it as well. There are, of course, a number of considerations. This is an awful lot of money for a brushed quadcopter. I'm very disappointed that they went with brush motors on here rather than brushless. The brush motors will eventually give up, and there's no spares in the kit. My biggest concern with this quadcopter is this isn't really teaching you how to fly a quad. If you are looking to do the things that you see in videos with people flying like racing quads or pretty much anything else that isn't DJI, this isn't going to teach you how to do that. The fact that you're not using a proper radio, the fact you're not using FPV gear, the fact that it is so full of help and support, and you can't easily turn that help and support off to get a more genuine feel of what flying a bigger non-DJI quadcopter's like, means that this is only really a gateway drug for larger DJI quadcopters. And if that's what you're potentially interested in, maybe getting a Phantom or one of those other DJI things later on, then you know what? This is probably a great way to do it. If you're actually interested in getting into the wider hobby outside of DJI, then I'd recommend going and getting something like the Fat Shark 101 FPV system. It's a little bit more money, but you get a radio, you get the FPV goggles, both of which can be used later in the hobby. And again, it's a little brush quadcopter, but it's using more traditional bits and pieces. It's even running Betaflight. So do keep that in mind. The video from this thing isn't fantastic. It's quite wavy. Because it's transmitted and stored on the phone, you can occasionally get a bit of lag and drop frames. So this isn't a quadcopter to use if you want to do video at all, but the pictures are quite nice. The camera works well despite its size and is nice and bright with good contrast and color control. Last couple of things, the app didn't work on my Samsung Galaxy tablet. I tried to get it working on that. Fortunately, it doesn't start up, it just gives me an error. So be careful of that. The application is more optimized for smaller devices, which is a bit of a shame because that tablet is much easier to see in videos. And the last comment I'd make is if you are going to get one of these, try and find a Bluetooth game controller that's going to allow you to use the sticks or controls on that Bluetooth game controller as the sticks for the controls of the quad. Using the tips of your thumbs to fly a quadcopter is not a great way to do it in my humble opinion. And again, although the muscle memory is going to be handy if you want to move on to something else once you've had enough of this particular quadcopter, it's not really teaching you the muscle memory you're going to need for a more traditional radio. So in summary, this is a very nice model. It's very well built, lots of technology in here. Sad they used brushed motors rather than brushless. I think that would have made it a far better quad. But the big thing to remember here is this is really a trainer quad if you're going to move up to DJI style quadcopters that have all that additional support where you're using things like the Wi-Fi signal for your FPV. If that's not the direction that you're interested in, then I'd stay away from the Tello. I'd get something like the Fat Shark system. Oh, there's lots of quads around at the moment, including things like Tiny Whoop and others, which would be a much better choice if you want to progress onto non-DJI quadcopters. If you found that video useful or like the content, then please hit the like and subscribe button down below. If you want to go the extra step, you can become a Patreon of the Painless 360 channel and help provide support for what I do here. All the videos created here are put into playlists, so if you're interested in a particular topic, have a look at the playlist, and they all are organised in there to make them easier to use. If you're not sure if there's a video for your particular problem or topic you want to know more about, then add Painless 360 to the Google search term that you're interested in, and that should find the video, article or content about the particular thing that you're interested in having a look at.